mule was America's promise in 1865 to people freed from slavery. Florida was specifically mentioned in the often quoted presidential order intended as reparation for the free labor provided by enslaved black citizens. Country land bordering Florida's St. Johns River was to be reserved for the settlement of the Negroes following the Civil War. Well, in 1915, Sarasota's government planned a version of 40 acres as well. Our guests today talk about that and repainting history. Also today, we'll talk to a candidate running for a seat on the Sarasota County School Board. What's it like to run for a school board seat in the age of socio-political dysfunction? Welcome to Empowering Voices. I'm Renee Gilmore. Walter Gilbert was born in Sarasota. He's a fourth-generation native here. He talks with us about the gentrification of Sarasota's first black neighborhood, and he's also joined by Latierra Love. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, we're going to talk about Sarasota's own version of 40 acres. That development that was set aside or plotted for the black citizens of Sarasota.
Right. The first black people came here in the late 1880s, and they came here for a couple reasons. The first reason was it wasn't Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia. The other reason is it was work here. This was a growing community. So when they came here, they had to have some place to live. So just like you mentioned, they were directed to an area of town where the white people weren't living, and they designated that where the black people would live. And that was a part of town that was known as Black Bottom or Overtown. And even as time passed...
And what do you know of the origins of it being called Black Bottom?
Well, what I know of is, of course, what's been passed down.
And this is how we do pass down history, right?
Yes.
This oral history,
Yes.
which I know is really important to you and Latierra
Yes.
and many others, right?
Yes, and it became known as Black Bottom because there was a little low-lying part of that area, and it was where black people lived, so Black Bottom. And just like Overtown got its name because it was over from downtown.
Okay, now continue the story. I think that's important as we talk about history,
Yes.
and I know that that's your thing.
Yes, so those people that came here in the late 1880s and needed a place to live, they was designated to live there by the people that was in charge. And they made it a community. They developed it. They had businesses, churches. The first black school was located in that same community. So as time passed on, though, they figured out, and the powers to be, that they needed that area now for their growth. So they did another 40 acres thing with us, and they plotted Newtown. And they moved the black people slowly but surely out of that area. They've renamed it the Rosemary District now, and that's where we are today.
Okay, and you are involved with or leading a project called, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but I want you to update us on where you are with the mural project.
Yes, we have an initiative known as the Gilbert Mural Initiative, and it's a idea I came up with to honor and remember those pioneers that I spoke of that built that community when it was the first black community here in Florida, in Sarasota, because now it's totally gentrified. I mean, there's only one original black family left in what we knew as Overtown now that's left. So as a young boy knowing what that community was, I was disheartened to see that there was no recognition of those people. And these are the people that built Sarasota, you know, that was the workers, the engine that drove the growth that happened here. So I just came up with something that I figured I could get done to remember and honor those people. And it's putting up murals of historic figures from that time.
And Ms. Love, what is your engagement with it? What role are you playing?
So we just finished a documentary with the new college students. Professor West, he has a program called Radiant Communities. So we partnered with Walter Gilbert, E.J. Porter, and Jetson Grimes, and we filmed these documentaries, and we're really excited. They're going to be screened this fall at a film festival. So thank you so much, Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you.
for
Thank you.
you know, helping the students. I mean, I don't know which ones to pick. There's about 10. We're going to pick 3 to screen at the festival, and they're all so good. They did a good job.
Tell us about one of them.
So one of them, it goes through the process of building the murals, you know, the whole concept, and they talk about the history. Well, it's kind of what Walter just explained to you. And it's a lot of fun. They just walk through the life of Walter, what the process of getting the artists, negotiating which buildings, the whole thing.
Okay. Now, Walter, when you talk about Overtown, now Rosemary District, I know one of the things that you love to talk about, and there's a mural of it, having to do with the Ace Theater. And you talk about when you were a boy, how you could not go to watch movies other than to the Ace Theater in Sarasota.
Yes, just like everything else Southern, Sarasota was a Southern place. It was operating under the Jim Crow laws of that era. And different things that we probably look at and scratch our heads about nowadays was that you could not go to a movie theater here, and that was white owned. So they had a black movie theater in Overtown known as the Ace Theater, and that was where the black people had to go to a movie.
Talk to us about what Overtown looked like at that point in time. I know that there's a church that's very important to the history, very important to the historical perspective of all of Sarasota. Talk to us about that church.
Payne Chapel AME Church, which was built by Leonard Reed, who was going to be another subject of a mural that we put up, built Payne Chapel Church. And Mr. Reed was a black pioneer here that was the right-hand man of Mr. John Gillespie, who was the first mayor. Mr. Reed's original home site was located on the corner, I still call it 6th Street, it's Boulevard of the Arts now, but on the corner of 6th Street and Coconut, where the Modern Hotel is. That's where we're going to put his mural up, by the way. But he built Payne Chapel AME Church, and from what I understand, Mr. Reed was going around to different construction sites and gathering leftover materials to build that church. And that's one of the buildings that's left there, historic buildings that's left there. It was built in 1927.
Now, my grandmother wrote a book called But My World.
Yes.
And we believe that it is the first book that documented black folks who lived in Sarasota back in the day. A lot of it was a lot of the people featured were people of her time, and there were some who came before her, but you know, my grandmother was
I knew your grandmother.
in the first graduated class of Booker High School, so that tells you how long she's been here, right? When we think about Booker High School and its glorious legacy. But I watched a video where I heard you talking about, as a child, you had to question, why is it that white people lived a certain way, and then here we lived in a different way? When you say we, speaking of the black folks who lived in Sarasota at that time. That obviously stuck with you. Talk to us about that. You talk about it in every time you talk about the Rosemary District, when you talk about Newtown, you talk about it hasn't always been this way.
Right. You know, growing up here, the difference was like in your face. I mean, it was nothing left to the imagination. My mother was a domestic worker. She worked hard, and so she had quite a few jobs. And one of her jobs was she did maid work, day maid work sometimes. And oftentimes I was a little bad kid, so she used to have to take me to work with her. So when we went to these places, I'm looking at these houses and how these people live, and I'm like, I don't get the difference, you know. Why do they have this and this, and we don't? And then at the same time, as I grew older, you know, why aren't we allowed to go certain places where I see these people going? You know, there's like restaurants. I just mentioned the movie theaters, the public beaches. I mean, all those questions just kept bothering me as a kid. And growing up, I asked the questions, and the answers wasn't making me happy. So I pretty much devoted my life to asking questions and getting answers, and if I didn't like the answers, I changed them.
I want to ask both of you all, Have you ever heard a child say, "I wish I was white"?
No, I haven't.
No, I haven't. Never heard that.
And why do you think that? I mean, why do you think that occurs in you all's lifetime?
Why do I think I'd never heard it?
Yes.
It's got to be who raised me, how I was raised. The people that was around me never gave me a reason to wish that. I wanted some of the things I saw those people having, and it was more like their freedom, their ability to go and do anything they want simply because they was white. But I never wanted or wished that. I just always strived to make that something that could be.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that you all ever
I
said
understand
that.
what you mean.
Yeah, I have a colleague who works here at the station who said to me she's a volunteer, and she said she's a volunteer at a local nonprofit, and a white woman, and she does work with young kids, most of them black, and she said that a young girl said to her, "I wish I was white like you and had long blonde hair," and she said that really struck her.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know if you ever saw Whoopi Goldberg in her younger days stage act, and she talked about that as her growing up because of the way she was treated as a child, and she saw things that those people she wished she had long flowing blonde hair, until she just looked at herself and said, "One day I'm beautiful." But that's what society has done to whoever that child was.
So it's not a foreign concept to you, because I'm saying
no, it's not foreign.
But I think that, you know, we're moving towards that with the whole black excellence, black girl magic. I think now, you know, people are being raised with loving themselves and seeing their beauty, which is a good thing. I would say my generation.
And I think it's exposure too. You know, what has that particular child that you described been exposed to or told? You know, so like I said, I owe mine to my mom and daddy. They didn't play it.
Me too.
That's wonderful. But for me, I can certainly see how, as a child, you go into what seems to be mansions. They're, you know, for people of means, it'd be like a regular house for them, right? But it seems like a mansion for children who come from neighborhoods like that, which was from a resource perspective. I'm talking about from a resource perspective. You walk in and you see kitchens in the house. You see bathrooms, not just one where everybody's sharing, but there are 2 bathrooms in the house. I mean, that was a big deal of luxury to have.
Of course.
Even that one bathroom when we're talking 1950.
But that's why we, you know, we moved the Leonard Reed House, and we're so excited about that project, so we can, you know, help with self-esteem. We want to have programs. We want to, you know, do all sorts of things so people can see themselves and celebrate this rich history.
Okay, so what's next for you all in terms of what the big, is there some unveiling?
Well, the big thing we have coming up is Mr. Buck O'Neill, who was raised here in Sarasota, Florida. He started in Overtown, moved to Newtown, like a lot of black people had to do, and went on to become a famous baseball player. He played for the Kansas City Monarchs in Kansas City, which was the premier team in the Negro Leagues. That's the team Jackie Robinson came from and many others. But Buck managed that team after playing there, and he became the first black coach in Major League Baseball.
And you're about to have him inducted into, not you, but we all are about to have him inducted into the Hall of Fame. When is that, before we wrap up here?
That's July 24th, and I put up a mural in Overtown of Mr. O'Neill in his honor, and we're going to have a watch party on that day and unveil the mural. All
right. Walter, thank you for joining us. Miss Love, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Okay.
Thank you, Renee.
All right. Well, up next, we're going to talk about what it's like running for the school board, running for a school board seat in this age of socio-political dysfunction. Stay with us.
There's only one original black family left over here now. The street we're on now was the heart and soul of the black community. They had black businesses here. You know, unfortunately, not only do most of the white community not know what was here, there's a generation or two of black kids that don't know anything about Overtown because it's been gone just that long. Like I say, the last
real group of people left here during 1970. So you got a lot of people that's been born and grew up since then that if their parents or somebody didn't tell them what was here, they wouldn't know. Right here in Sarasota, I was born here in 1952. My parents were from here, their parents were from here. I'm fourth generation.